Hello, my name is Maseke Rioba, an non-resident fellow at Ufahamu Africa, and in today's episode, we redefine sports and bring into the spotlight one of the most elite competitions in Africa that perhaps would suit most of the youth, and it doesn't consider their physique or personality, so anybody can take part in it. Thoughts on sports often revolve around athletics, football, rugby, swimming, and other entertainment activities that demand a lot of physique. I personally would have loved to contribute to those statistics, but I remember back in Form 1, a football hit me during games time and I fainted, not because the ball hit me, but because I was ashamed like you, man. A ball just put me down. That is how I personally cancelled sports and joined the debate club. I realized from a very young age that engaging your intellect through sports such as chess, quiz competitions, essays, public speaking, and debates are also an important way of keeping fit, networking, and monetizing your craft. I'm passionate about this particular episode and this particular topic because my success, my networks, my career trajectory, and my deep understanding of different concepts in Africa is directly linked to it. So let's talk debates. Debating is an art of argumentation about a subject in a formal manner. It typically happens from primary level to secondary level or high school and then gets more intense in tertiary institutions. And debating entails training in the different styles of debating, for example, or the most common is the British parliamentary format, where you have the government bench with an opening bench and a closing bench, and the opposition bench with an opening bench and a closing bench. It's a little bit complex, but you'll understand it with time. So it normally starts with understanding the different styles of debating, followed by competitions, and then finally you can decide to transition either to be an adjudicator or join debate bodies and councils. And what you will then do there is either convening tournaments and all that. Education in Africa is often structured to fit academic activities. Aside from academic activities, of course, there are the sports, but priority will be given to the academics. However, research shows that children's gifts vary beyond academics, and therefore, for holistic development, it's important to include sports, both physical and intellectual, in their curriculum. And therefore, incorporating debates to a larger extent ensures that a child who's gifted more as a speaker, or who's good with languages, or who probably is good with expressing themselves, will have something better to do that will then influence their future. And Africa has really evolved when it comes to the debating culture. And as such, at this point, I figured it will be very important to talk about it because it deals with youth, it deals with education, it contributes directly to leadership, as will be discussed with a few of our panelists and all that. So at least every regional bloc has a number of established debaters who transitioned from competitions into adjudication and into their own organizations in Africa that aspire to articulate a better Africa. And some of those organizations include the Tanzania Competitive Rhetoric Organization, Epitome Intelligence in Kenya, Oration Hub in Kenya, Africa Debate Academy in Kenya, Open Space Forum in Uganda, and institutional societies that are using dialogue to drive change. For example, Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, or University of Ghana, or in South Africa, different institutions are also doing the same. So they're lobbying for policies, they're using dialogue to drive change, they're contributing to thematic conversations such as climate change, sexual rights, sexual reproductive health rights, sustainable development goals, and women empowerment. Additionally, one of Africa's challenges is in unemployment, and just like all sports, monetizing debates has been proven and tested as an efficient way of monetizing one's craft. For this particular conversation, we have Njuguna Macharia from Kenya, who is the founder of Africa Debate Academy, and Lawrence Nikwe from Ghana, who is one of the most prolific trainers in Africa when it comes to debating. And we're going to get their point of view on what debating is all about in Africa, because I think I can ramble about it the whole day. But my point is, people, pick that skill and let it do the work for you. So if you're a youth or you're in university and you're looking for something to do, you will gain a lot from these two gentlemen. All right. So for this particular episode, and just to pick up the conversation from where we left from, we are discussing debate and public speaking in Africa. And like I was telling you at the beginning, one of the funniest motions we ever did when we were young was education is better than money. And I would like to ask our guest for the day as he introduces himself, is education better than money?
Definitely not. Money always is number one. While life is obviously much better when you're educated, it becomes significantly harder without money. So if I was to choose one, you'd obviously want to have money so that you're comfortable and everyone in your family and those around you are also comfortable. So yes, money is better than education. I think a soft life is better than just a knowledgeable life.
Funny that your introduction in itself portrays you as a debater, but give us a little bit of the tea. Who are we dealing with today? Who do we have on the podcast?
Thank you so much. Yes, so my name is Njuguna Macharia. I am a law graduate from Strathmore University, and I have about 8 to 9 years worth of competitive debating experience. As a debater, I have spoken and debated in most major finals and most major competitions around the continent, which include the Pan-African Universities Debate Championship, where I was a finalist and runners-up in 2019. I've won the Accra Open Championship twice, in 2021 and 2022. I have very many years of debating experience as a speaker, as a judge. I've also been a deputy chief adjudicator of the World Universities Debating Championship in 2023, and I can say that that was probably the highlight of my debating career, which was last year. So I have quite a lot of experience on issues of debate. I started the African Debate Academy last year. The African Debate Academy is a platform or a company that is supposed to bring debate education to East Africa and hopefully in the near future, Africa as a whole. We generally organize debate events, public speaking events, and recently we also added quizzes to improve communication and critical thinking skills among young people in Africa today. So that is what we are working on. We are tirelessly organizing tournaments. We go to schools. We train the students both at high school level and primary school level. And, we hope that in the next few years, we can expand our programs from being local here in Kenya to being regional in East Africa to even one day being continental in Africa. So that is the African Debate Academy and what we do.
So my first question to you, Macharia, would be, how would you define debating to a student and why is it important as a sport? And just to give you a little bit of context, at the start of this conversation, I was discussing with the audience why debating is an intellectual sport in its own way. Like, I can't do rugby, you can't do something like high jump or long jump and all that, but we have debating as a sport in its own way. So how would you define debating to a student and why is it important as a sport?
I like to tell people that debate, yes, is a sport, but it's also an art. So it combines both the sporting elements of, any other sport, but also artistic elements of creativity, expression, and everything. So I like to tell kids that this is both a sport and a science and an art. And I like to tell kids it's a way of unlocking your potential and knowing who you truly are. So you come, you speak, you learn, you read, you explore different ideas. And through that entire process, you get to learn more about the world, but also more about yourself and what your interests are and what you actually are good at. And I love it because, as I said, it's a sport, it's also an art, and so it has room for everyone to just come and find their little place in debating and have the time of their lives. It changes lives. I've seen it change lives. So I also tell kids it's a life-changing opportunity for you. So that's how I like to define it. It is a sport, an art, and sometimes even a science. Who knows? It is everything you want it to be.
Definitely. And you normally introduce yourself as a debate major and a law minor, right? I hear people talk about that a lot. So you went to school for more than 4 years or close to I don't know how many years to study law, but you're calling it a minor and debate is your major. So how did you get into debating and how has it contributed to your professional direction right now?
Thank you. Let me first start by clarifying that I did not call myself this. Other students called me this. Just in case anyone is listening to me, like my parents, I didn't name myself that. So I think I used to spend so much time in school on issues of debate that my classmates would say, you're a part-time law student and a full-time debater. So it was because I used to spend so many of my hours in school on debate issues and very few of my hours on the actual degree that I was doing that people just said I was a double major, but my major is debate and my minor is law. So it was not me who came up with it. On the second question of how it has shaped my direction, of course, when you go to law school, everyone expects that when you're finished, you will go and you'll become an advocate. And then after being an advocate, you will wear the robe, sign the role of advocates, and then go to a law firm, become an associate, and work your way up the ranks. If those who are rebellious end up in like the NGO world or the development community, like just as advisors, to if different issues like climate change and all that. So I think I can say I went rogue and now I'm in issues of debate and public speaking, and people still don't understand what I do. I still get the question every day, what do you do? How? So I tell them I do debate and they're like, what does that even mean? Well, it means exactly that. We teach issues of debate, we coach, we do events, we do everything around debate, and that's largely what I do as a career. So I decided to dedicate a lot of my life to young children and developing them, and so that is how I spend most of my mornings to evenings in different classes, in different schools, online, physical, teaching children about debate, public speaking. So all the work in my major in university has now given me the job I am doing today. So yes, my major in debating has paid off, and now I run the African Debate Academy.
And back to just your own journey in debating, how did you get into it?
You've really mentioned the correct answer, which is where everybody in Kenya in debating starts from, which is usually the Great Debaters Contest. And I remember in 2013, my school was interested in participating and they didn't know who to send. So they just picked the loudest students in the school and said, you guys form the team, go and debate. And somehow we made it to the semifinals that year and they were like, wow, you guys can actually do this. And I was like, yes. And so when I got to campus, it was, I think, week 1 of school, and a lady called Ruth was walking around school and was like, there's a competition, I'm sure you know it, the Scholars Festival, which happens or is hosted every year. And they were like, we're looking for people to go for a tournament. And who was I? I was like, yes, pick me. And they were like, okay, let's go. And again, I made it to the semifinals on my first attempt, and they were like, surely there must be something good you're doing here. And that's how I got into debate in high school and then again in university. But again, it's mostly just being in the right place at the right time. In high school, I was loud enough, so I was picked. In university, I was in the right classroom, and the person who was looking for debaters was like, you guys, who knows how to debate? And I was like, me. And they, from there, we've never looked back. So it started with the Great Debaters Contest. So I think we need to appreciate those guys. They've literally been like the gateway for debating for a lot of kids.
Just to continue with that and explain a little bit about the Scholars Festival. So in Kenya, we normally have a national, let me call it a national tournament, for lack of a better word. Well, it's not really regionally balanced, but it would cut as a tournament where university students come together to debate, to do quiz challenges. Sometimes there's poetry and also public speaking. And the champion sometimes gets sponsored to attend the Pan-African Universities Debate Championships. So this is going to be one of the questions that's going to come up, like where can youth involve themselves in debating, especially when they're in university. So we'll get into that in a little bit. As we carry on, we've moved from high school debates. No, let's just go back all the way to primary school. We've moved from primary school motions where food is better than water. Like we were just thinking it. I think it was all critical thinking. We get to high school and the topics become a little bit more complex, and they start engaging us from the political aspect, from the economic, socio-economic, cultural aspect. And then we get to university and people are debating policy motions and all that. So how do debate motions transition from high school to university? Like, how does it gradually become more complex?
So usually critical thinking is something that is developmental, if there's a word like that, which is to say that you can't expect somebody who is just starting to be able to analyze the most complicated issues going on in society. So whenever we are designing topics for juniors, and when we are designing topics for high school students and designing topics for university students, we look at just how exposed, how informed, how, as their mind is also a muscle, how trained is their mind in thinking through very complex situations. So you'd be surprised though that where we are starting from these days and what we do, we don't start kids on food is better than water. I did a primary school competition the other day and they were debating social media, artificial intelligence, democracy. These kids will surprise you with just how informed, and especially in the age of information we are in today, they know a lot. So these days they are starting, the basic concepts are artificial intelligence, technology, education, politics. They know some of these things, but then as they grow older, we make it a bit more complicated. We introduce issues of identity, religion, and all this, and by the time they're getting to university, they're debating very wild concepts like the election in Brazil, to education policy in Latvia, to different things that they are supposed to be exposed to. So the progression is largely supposed to be improving your mind in analyzing complex situation. As the mind is a muscle, we need to ease it into becoming much stronger and much more active in engaging in some of these issues. So that's how we decide what topics to set for which level, and it's really paid off. You'd be surprised just how complicated things are these days when people are starting debating.
Do you feel like in any way they contribute to things like policy making, leadership, change management, and overall behavioral management amongst the youth?
I think this is a very good question, which is really the impact of debate on someone's life. I think what debate does, and I've listened because I interact a lot with teachers, and they like to tell me that some of my students, especially the debaters, tend to be the sharpest students in school. They perform very well in class. They are also leaders because they have taught how to express themselves, how to think critically, how to, engage on different issues. And so we're beginning to see, and I'm seeing this a lot because even with the African Debate Academy, I interact a lot with these students. You meet someone, they're like, oh, it's just a normal student. Next time you meet them, they were made a prefect. Next time you meet them, they're the head boy. You're like, what's going on? In fact, a lot of school captains are also in the debate clubs. You find that when our events are going on, everyone is with those badges and different ties. And so I am yet to do the scientific research on it, but there seems to be some correlation between being a good communicator, being a good debater and a good critical thinker, and also being a great leader. And also it's somehow translating also into their academic performance. I was talking to a teacher from Mombasa who was saying, I had a debate club that started with people in Form 2 when they were scoring Ds. When they were leaving Form 4, they all left here with A's and B's. And I was like, what? Yes. And it was because debate somehow changed their life. So there's some research to be done there. I'm sure some people have done it, but I haven't yet done it. But I do see it in terms of the correlation between debate and how students are being impacted to becoming better leaders and being better performers, not just in school, but also just generally in life.
I think one thing that's very important about debating is that the vast array of questions we are normally asked allows us to think way ahead and be more informed of things around us. We stop thinking of the normal 250-meter radius around us. No, we go to the Congo, we go to Brazil, we go to the US, we go to Russia, we go everywhere. So you find at the end of the day with debating, you've picked a little bit of everything from everywhere, and over time you start building on something. South Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, Botswana, Zimbabwe are countries you easily interact with, be it physically, be it virtually, for debating. Those tournaments are not small. Some of them are invitational only, which means you have to be one of the best in Africa to be a part of those conversations. So my question is there room for collaboration across Africa between educational institutions that can help us to make debates bigger and engage the youth even more?
Of course, the potential is massive. It is massive in terms of just putting together platforms for these inter-school, intercultural, inter-region exchanges for students to come and listen to or debate on different issues affecting Africa and also affecting them as young people, both Gen Z, whether it's millennial, whatever it is, they just come and have these conversations. The problem is that the capacity and the theory is there, but the practical is missing. The potential is very high, and I think this is something we've been trying to do as the African Debate Academy. This week we are hosting the East African World Schools Debating Championship, which is really to bring students from East Africa and put them in the same platform and say, let's discuss the issues that are affecting us as a region, but also as young people. There's also the Pan-African Schools Debating Championship, which also exists to do the same exact thing. And there are different regional events and competitions and also exchanges that exist for young people to come together from their different regions, but also as a continent, to discuss and have these conversations. The problem is that practically it's not easy to create as much impact because, as you're all aware, there's different school schedules all around the continent. You find many schools, maybe when these events are happening, are having other programs too. Funding is always a problem. Like, children want to attend these things, but they can't afford to attend these things because moving from here to South Africa or moving from here to Botswana, or Botswana coming here, is not an affair that is very cheap. So it creates also some inequality there, because those who end up even going tend to be those who come from the most privileged schools, and those who come from less privileged schools don't get the opportunity to have these conversations. So the platform is massive. I think if you want to impact a generation, as I was saying the other day, you start with its children, you start with its young people. So if you want to shape minds of Democrats, future people who can engage on policies that affect young people, from education to health to sustainability, you need to start them early, as we were talking about the critical thinking development. So it's there in theory, the potential is there, it's massive, but practically the implementation in Africa is very poor. Other regions have hacked it and they do it very well, but in Africa we don't have much going on in terms of these platforms for such exchanges. And you know, it's I think it's just a characteristic of our continent anyway.
I see the fact that we do not have the capacity, yes. However, if we were kind enough to ourselves and if we really thought about our futures, there are things that can be pushed around, even be it in collaboration with the government and all that. Because I'm looking at it from the view of a country like Ghana. Ghana works so well with their government in ensuring that there are different debate institutions in universities, Kwame Nkrumah, University of Ghana, universities that have stood out, receive that support. But inequality comes out so strongly where we as Kenyans, we do not invest in things that will change our future. So I hope something can be done about that in Africa. And then you've just mentioned that other continents have managed to hack it. So what is it that they're doing that's different from the African continent?
They have worked a way to both create access and balance access and quality. So like the US runs one of the largest debating and public speaking and just this critical thinking development programs all around the entire state, the entire country. But the way they do it is that they've devolved it to different states, and different states have budgets every year. They allocate towards these events, and these events are spread across the whole country. They do them from the lowest level, which is their district level. They progress to the state level. They progress from the state level all the way to the national level. And even at the national level, they have ways of interacting and sending students every year to different intercultural debates that are happening in Asia, in Europe. They don't come to Africa though. So I'm seeing it, and it happens a lot, which is different regions have found a balance between, you know, different stakeholders coming together and each playing their part, whether it's the government, the institutions, education institutions themselves, private funders, private companies or corporations, NGOs. So they found a balance of getting all these people together and saying, here is the goal, here is the aim, this is what we are seeking to do, here is how we can all play a part to make sure this actually happens. That's what we haven't done in Africa, because what happens is that people are working in isolation. So even if the government is doing a debate or a government organization is doing, they'll do it on their own. They won't invite private sector, they won't invite anybody else who is involved in this space to do it. You find that when private companies are doing it, they just do it on their own. They don't. So we are still very disjointed, and I think the minute we all come together as all key stakeholders and say, here is what we want to impact children positively like this, how can we all play a role in achieving this goal? That is, I think, the day that we will now begin to break the barriers that we are beginning to see that exists currently in the space. So other regions broke those barriers. We will break those barriers slowly and get all stakeholders that are needed. And once that happens, we'll begin to see the impact of that with the future generations and future leaders that come out of our systems of education.
So I cannot wrap this conversation before I discuss the convening side of debates, because we've finished the participation side where you have been a debater, you've moved to adjudication, you've interacted with almost all continents at this point. Explain to us who a convener is, what you do in your capacity as a convener, and then probably link it back to Africa Debate Academy.
So a convener is basically an event organizer. I think that's the simplest way I can put it for people. Basically, you're responsible for bringing people together for a certain event that is supposed to achieve a certain goal. For different events we convene, as the word suggests, different groups of people. Sometimes we are convening primary schools, sometimes we are convening high schools, sometimes we are convening universities. So we bring people together, we mobilize them, and we put together events now that are necessarily aimed at improving debate, public speaking, and critical thinking skills among young people in Kenya right now, but also in Africa in the future. So as a convener, you're responsible for these platforms. So that is what convening is. Linking it to the African Debate Academy, I think basically as of now, the company is necessarily involved a lot in convening, because one of the ways we are seeing we are going to impact young people today is through creating the platforms for them to first create or express themselves. So they need to come first and debate. They need to see, do I actually know how to debate? Am I actually good at this thing? Do I even know about these motions that people are talking about? So we first create those platforms, and then from those platforms we're able to take out these students and we put them now through training. We go to their schools, we develop their capacity, we develop their knowledge, we teach them more about the skills, and as time goes by you begin to see the improvement among the young people. So convening is something that starts with an event, but really the main goal of convening is to bring people together with the aim of creating an impact in their lives by improving their debate, public speaking, critical thinking, communication, all these skills that are learned at these events. So you're a glorified event organizer, but really there's a lot more you do in the background to ensure that these events and these platforms are impactful and changing people's lives each and every day.
What opportunities do you see in debates as a tool for shaping African leaders, especially amongst the youth?
The opportunities are endless. We just have to actually grab them. So the good thing with these opportunities is that they're segmented. So there are opportunities for different people at different levels. Whether you're in primary school, we have events. Other people have events for primary school people. I think there's World Scholars, there's MUN, there's debate, there's different things that, you can be able to involve yourself in to improve your skills in debating, public speaking, communication, and everything. At high school level, the events even become more because now the opportunities are endless. Whether it's debate, public speaking, quiz, the government is doing it, different private people are doing it. There's so much you can do. And then at university level, it gets weird because the debates become fewer, but the opportunities become more, because the opportunities for you to join things like fellowships, to join things like Toastmasters are still enhancing the same skills, but now using different methods. So I think the opportunities for you to plug into and learn more about these things are endless. Of course, the African Debate Academy has very many programs, all around the country, whether it's Mombasa, Kisumu, Nairobi, different regions. There's enough for you, but there are also other people doing it. And I think in terms of how it translates to shaping and improving the lives of young people, I don't want to speak so much about that now because I feel like the impact of this will be felt in years to come. So it will change, and I think the lives of people will change, and the shape of this country and the type of leaders we produce will definitely change. But the good thing is we have enough time to see what happens. I can give you case studies from outside where we've seen people who we used to debate with at local level, university level, are now the heads of serious organizations and serious companies in their countries. I've seen it in Uganda, you see it in Ghana, you see it in South Africa, where some of these people used to debate with are now the ones in charge of the political parties, their MPs, their news, they're ones reading they're the ones running the conversations in media. So it happens each and every day where you see the impact of debate on different people's lives in making them change makers. But I think for us as Kenyan, we will feel this impact maybe in a few years to come. Other regions have been doing it for a long time. For us, we just started. So especially with the young people, the primary schools, the high schools, and the entire value chain of that, we will feel the impact in years to come. But I think there's enough case studies outside to show that debate does change people's lives and make them better.
One last question before your final words. What are some of the challenges you face as a convener?
Dealing with schools is an absolute nightmare most of the time because they are bureaucratic, they are slow, like they make decisions out of the blue. So I think the biggest challenge we struggle with is the consistency of just having some consistency, because schools come, go, disappear, teacher moves, they can't debate anymore. It's very difficult to maintain that consistency. Funding is also a huge issue, because how do you create quality without overcharging students? Because when you overcharge students, you create inequality. Does that make sense? Like, how do we balance quality but also allow access for young people? I don't want there to be a situation where only certain schools can access these platforms. It should never be like that. There's also a huge challenge with human resource, which is that while the events, you find that you have almost 1,200 students, but the people running the event are 10. But thankfully, we overcome these challenges, and so far so good. Things have been going well, but hopefully in the future we can streamline some of these things to make them better.
What would you tell the youth out there about just picking something that can work for them outside the normal go to school, be an engineer, be a doctor, be a lawyer? What else is there?
In I don't know how to say this, but the simplest way I can put it is that you need a hobby in this life, and you need skills that are outside what mainstream society tells you need to do. With the advent of things like artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, and all these things, a lot of work that was deemed, or a lot of the things we used to do that were mainstream safe and secure, are no longer mainstream safe and secure. So it's important to focus our lives, or as young people, focus our education not on theory or just concepts that are in books, but skills that we can use to impact not just our lives but other people's lives. So as young people, we must begin to think towards the future and say, what does our work look like in the future? Does it look like being a writer? I don't know. If you want to be a writer, ChatGPT writes anything. Do you want to be a doctor? There's medical people are consulting AI for diagnosis and everything. So you have to, even within these fields, find ways of carving niches that we think are going to be sustainable in the long term, but also not just impact our lives, but impact other people's lives. So I think what I was simply trying to say with those many words was, find a hobby that is improving you as a human being each and every day, whatever it is, and however you do it. Make sure you also put as much effort into developing those skills as much as you put effort into developing your academic resume and CV and everything. So there are ways in which these skills can be used to create, impact in our lives, but also impact in other people's lives. I think that was the last part, and please let me emphasize that. I know it's past time, but please let our skills not just benefit us, but benefit other people. I think we live a life in service to others, which is really what we do at African Debate Academy. Our job is to improve other people's lives.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Njuguna Macharia, for sparing time to tell us a little bit about debating, to tell us a little bit about your journey, your experience as a debater, an adjudicator, a trainer, and a convener. And we leave with the words: live your life in service to others. With that, thank you so much for tuning in and see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Ufahamu Africa. You can find more episodes, show notes, and transcripts on our website, ufahamuafrica.com. This podcast is produced and managed by Megan DeMint, with help from production assistants Chukwufunanya Ikechukwu, Alex Kozak, and Ami Tamaklo. Our non-resident podcast fellows are Bamba Njaye, Maseke Rioba, Takono Priscilla Sempere, and Kamohelo Tuniko Toletti. We are generously supported by the Carnegie Corporation of New York and receive research assistance from Cornell University and the University of California, Riverside. Our music is courtesy of Kevin McLeod. Until next week, Safiri Salama.